child living at the score and looking towards Bengairn, especially about the time of sunset, might well think that fairyland lay that way. The streak of gold across the estuary, the shadowed mystery of the country beyond, and then the feathered sides of the hills. All of this would make him think that if he climbed up among those distant trees to the skyline, he would behold a vision splendid.
The Water Orr is a considerable river which discharges itself into the sea through a wide opening between the hills at high water filled by the tide. At its mouth, its inlet is 2 miles in breadth, but a little within a lofty ridge of rock juts out into the channel and divides the Orr from the Bay of Belcree. Close the Orr have an alpine grandeur and rudeness, and the whole scenery of the estuary under the incidental effect given to it by a dark sky and a tempestuous sea was magnificently wild. Just within the entrance, near the west point, is a small island called Heston Isle, now almost buried under the foam from the sea.
When we think of old Palnackie, we think of the port, bustling with ships and loading their multifarious cargoes. In fact, as we know it now, it is fairly recent, not much older than the school. Built in 1803. The harbour was not faced in stone until the mid-19th century, essentially its heyday, nor a harbour master appointed until 1879.
That is not to say that the earlier inhabitants of Palnackie were strangers to the sea. Far from it. But they dealt not in ports and harbours, but in creeks and caves and midnight landings.
Before the 19th century, the biggest industry in Galloway, after farming, was smuggling.
If you wake at midnight and hear a horse's feet, don't go drawing back the blinds or looking in the street. Then the task's no questions, isn't told a lie. Watch the wall, my darling, while the gentlemen go by.
25 ponies trotting through the dark.
Brandy for the parson,
baccy for the clerk.
laces for a lady,
Letters for a spy.
Watch the wall, my darling, while the gentlemen go by.
Running round the woodlump, if you chance to find little barrels roped and tarred, filled with brandy wine. Don't you shout to come and look, nor use 'em in your play. Put the brushwood back again, and they'll be gone next day.
If you meet King George's men dressed in blue and red, be careful of what you say, and mindful of what is said.
If they call you a pretty maid, and chuck you neath the chin, don't you tell them where no one is, nor yet where no one's been.
20 ponies tossing through the door, Brandy for the parson and baccy for the clerk.
Then the task's no questions, isn't told a lie.
Watch the wall, my darling, while the gentlemen go by.
In 18th century Galloway, smuggling was both profitable and popular. People of all ranks got their brandy, their rum, gin, wines, tea, tobacco, lace and salt by this means, and they winked at the deception.
Even poor, it was said, could afford to drink tea. Elsewhere, the luxury of the privileged. Most of these goods came through the independent lordship of Man, only 20 miles away,
where as early as 1670 Liverpool merchants openly flouted excise duty. Whilst with over 30 sheltered and secluded bays and coves between Southerness and the Fleet, Galloway was ideally placed as an entry point for contraband. Taking off through the hills, north to the cities of the Central Belt and south to the flesh pots of England. Needing no ports or quays, the flat-keeled boats were beached on quiet shores, unloaded and then floated off with the next tide.
Evidence of smuggling lies all around Palnackie.
Adam's Chair at Balcony Point is said to be the place where a smuggler of that name signalled with his lantern to the incoming boats, and there are brandy-holding cliffs at Orlan.
There are caves all along the Galloway shore. The biggest are the Great Caves of Burloco. Balcony House was built by a smuggling syndicate of 3 wealthy smugglers.
As many as 50 men could be seen riding out of Craig Row, the smugglers' settlement at Tor, and the remains of a landing place can still be seen at Garvelin Point.
A smuggler called Booker T had an inn at Palnackie, then called Bogle's Creek. Since a bogle is an evil or mischievous spirit, perhaps it was so called to keep people away?
An old smuggling song celebrates brandy at the Abbey Burn and gin at Heston Bay. At Orchard and Tower, the vaulted cellars of a mansion house, once attached to the old tower and used to store contraband, can still be seen.
The smuggler cave in Burlocken Wood was kept secret for many years, with a signalling point above at Glowrowram.
There were special cellars in the mansions at Kipford and Colvend, whilst the brandy cave at Colvend was a secret, only known to a few. Portal Warren was the scene of a smuggler's death, shot on the eve of his wedding, making one last run.
Both Glenstockin by Butcher's Isle, home of another famous smuggler, and Amorness by Gibbs Hole were starting points of the trails north of the Lingtown men with their rope slings. By the middle of the 18th century, popular support and the increase of smuggling made the revenue agencies despair.
Smugglers ride openly through the country in troops of 20, 30, 40 and sometimes upwards to 50 horses. They suffer no officer to come near to try to discover who they are, far less seize their goods.
As early as 1710, the merchant traders of Dumfries had warned that legitimate trade was threatened by the wholesale smuggling and complained of the open recapture of confiscated goods.
A great number of men with drawn swords and pistols cocked entered the town on horseback and broke open the houses where the brandy was lodged and employed all the fuel carts in town to carry off the same on the Sabbath day.
Many were the stories of a smuggling derring-do, humiliating and frustrating the forces of law and order, often with women in important roles. Even a game of hide and seek was not always as innocent as it seemed to be.
One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ready.
One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
9.
Little progress could be made against a population that saw smuggling as patriotic and where there were so many ways of cheating the excisemen.
However much I try. What rhymes with Max's? Katz's. It's a hard life being a poet.
Oh, Mr. Burns, sir, I think you're so wonderful.
Thank you, so do I.
Come over here to the window, say it with your ring.
Just a minute. It's supposed to be section you're headed for contraband.
Will you know quietly now? The Wayne's suffering, so she is.
Oh, my poor child, what ails you?
I got concertina. Scarlatina. Scarlatina.
Well, it certainly sounds like concertina. Just a minute. This white powder.
Oh, it's nothing.
I can get the sniffer dogs in, you know.
You're making a big mistake.
If this stuff hits the streets, it'll spoil everyone's pie in Galloway.
It's baking powder.
It's not.
It's salt. Salt? Oh, no, we wouldn't. It's ours for personal use.
Oh, for that though. I'm sorry, I know you like my poetry, but I'm going to have to book you. I can't close my eyes to it. Hey, what are you doing?
Curse it, the minute's on full. We're gonna have to move the sacks.
Come on, it's on your side, really. Up here and south, down with poetry. I mean, I only do it to impress people. I know it's rubbish, really.
Hold out your hand.
Oh no, I've been to Palnackie Academy and felt the toss.
Hold out your hand.
What's this? Coins, gold, and all mine. There's enough here to pay for an evening at the Globe and a visit to Irving's Bakery. Wealth beyond the dreams of indigestion.
So, this is where you've been hiding, Burns.
No, sir, I was set upon my ugly land of cutthroats.
There's been some hard-faced women about.
No, there were witches and warlocks, and people coming out of graves, and old Nick in the shape of a beast.
Come on, Burns, pull yourself together, lad, or you'll never get mentioned in dispatches.
That's it. That's it. What? You found it.
What?
My rhyme. A wandering exciseman I, a thing of shreds and tackers. However much I try, I don't get mentioned in dispatches.
Our two local worthies may have had similar attitudes to the fair sex, but they took rather different sides over breaking the law.
I am the famous pirate, John Paul Jones. Split my gizzard, whatever that might be. Feared on the 7 seas and in all other carrions across the Royal. I founded the American Navy and just about to find the Russian Navy. But you can't like or could be. Home. I believe of the rich Earl of Moneybag, Selkirk, the rich Earl of Selkirk, and his lovely wife. Can any of you kind persons direct me?
Just a minute. Are you the garter's lad from Abigail?
No.
The jumped up little toe rag that was apprenticed at White Haven, and then came back and set fire to it.
No, a different John Pilgrims entirely. It's a very common name, you know.
I've seen you somewhere before. Have you been to the kirk at Kirkbean?
I've been to the kirk, but not to the kirk at Kirkbean.
You must have been to the kirk sometimes.
I've been to Kirkbean, but not to the kirk at Kirkbean. Not for a long time, anyway.
Ah, so you're a has-been that has been to the kirk at Kirkbean.
I'm not going to continue this conversation any longer. I'm a pet. I get to shoot you.
Okay.
Tradition also has him taking a hand in smuggling. A cave on the nearby shore is named after him, and his patrons at Kirkbean were certainly not averse to contraband. In 1711, for instance, 120 gallons of brandy were taken from a smuggling ship straight into a Bigland house. Wilder spirits on the Solway coast now, however, could go much further afield, and the empire had become the Scotsman's oyster. Born plain John Paul, son of a gardener at Bigland, he served his apprenticeship out of Whitehaven, and then after 4 years honest seafaring, he took up with blackbirding. His cargoes were chained together, scarcely able to move, and with only 2'6" headroom, never able to stand. Leaving the trade after 3 years and gaining his first command, he quelled a mutiny by killing the ringleader.
Fleeing to the American colonies, he assumed the name of Jones and joined their fleet.
During the American War of Independence, he returned to British waters to prey on unarmed merchantmen.
Whenever he went into the Americas, John Paul had always found help from fellow countrymen from Galloway to provide him with passage home from Jamaica to get him into the American Navy. and to give him lodgings. None, however, have quite expected the results of their kindnesses. Reaching the Solway of the circumnavigation of Britain, he moored his privateer off Whitehaven and attempted unsuccessfully to fire the town. Trying to redeem his reputation with the crew, he followed this up with an attempt to kidnap the Earl of Selkirk at Kirkcudbright.
More of a mile than a miss. Now I'm fine, Philly. What's a strapping young man like you doing in a dump like this?
Oh, don't try to Paul Jones me. And it's not a dump. It is the home of the Earl of Selkirk, St. Mary's Isle.
And is the good Earl at home?
No, he's gone to Dumfries to count his money.
Still no reliable transport then from Dumfries to Kirkcudbright?
No, it's just that he's got a lot of money.
Is that so?
In fact, there's a perfectly good new road out by the military, goes by Milton and Hargate.
Good roads are indeed essential to civilization and the exertion of industry in every sphere.
Yeah. True. The military road from Dumfries to Port Patrick has produced many good effects in this respect. By means of it, mountains formerly appearing impervious are now no longer formidable.
Is that so?
A stranger passes with ease to give and receive information.
Good.
And articles of trade are transported with facility.
Ah, who's that extraordinary well-set young man standing on my lawn? What a vision of beauty! Tell me, madame, is your mother the Countess at home? Sir, I am the Countess. Surely not. You can't be more than 15. Sir, you flatter me.
He is the very prince of politeness.
So what first attracted you to the elderly millionaire, the Earl of Selkirk? First attracted me to him? Yes. It was his spoons. His spoons? Come on.
His spoons?
Yes, his silver spoons. He has the finest collection this side of Great Nareen. I have some fine ones of my own.
You tempt me, madame.
Would you like to come upstairs and count them?
Fewer things, madame, give me greater pleasure.
You're the very essence of civility, sir. But tawdry polish the gridirons. I need you sometime.
And you two, scatter about, see what else you can get your hands on. And where do you two think you're going?
The loo?
With him? Oh, no, you're not. You'll stay here and clean all that mess you made.
You can't talk to us like that. We're fierce and pirates.
If you don't, you'll get the back of my besom.
All right.
It's the captain! Belay!
What does belay mean? I've always wondered.
It's what sailors say, isn't it? I've been robbed! Robbed!
What? Didn't he count your spoons?
Yes, he did, and then he stole them.
Well, madam, it's your own fault. I taught you not to rely on double entendre.
Neither piracy nor smuggling did much, however, to advance the interests of the ordinary people of Galloway. It was reported that on the Solway shore
There is neither legitimate trade nor industry. Young men give up steady work as fishermen, farmers, or craftsmen to earn easy money. For excitement tinged with heroics, and brandy runs like whale water.
the real benefit to the region and the foundation of its ports, like Palnackie, lay in the honest industry of its people and those in the surrounding hinterland. And this could begin in earnest only when the attractions of smuggling and piracy had been reduced. This was accomplished by a combination of a substantial increase in efforts for their prevention and changes in the tax law. Not only was the revenue service searching the villages and towns for contraband, but it was developing too a network of tide watchers and cutters, small boats combing the inlets, and bigger ships patrolling out to sea. By the 1820s, smuggling had been all but wiped out, surviving only sporadically, which it still does, and with its passing, went a whole way of life. Palnackie was established as a trading port only once developments in land travel had stimulated sufficient improvements in agriculture and industry to create a surplus.
They began with the most basic necessity, the development of proper roads, and paradoxically, not through any careful planning or deeply felt need, but as a result of that last desperate fling of the Jacobites, the 1745 rebellion. There is a widespread misconception that Culloden was fought between the English and the Scots, a view much encouraged by the Swiss artist David Moirier's painting of the battle using government troops and Jacobite prisoners. In fact, appearances can be deceptive.
I'm Hamish Cameron and I'm 16 years of age. I fought because my landlord said he'd burn my parents' house down and slaughter all our cattle if we didn't.
You can't believe at your service. When I came from France, they made me wear these clothes to look fierce, they said, and to protect me against the natives.
I'm Sergeant John Baines from Derby. They're only rebels because they're hungry. What they need is industry. We should teach them how to brew beer and make shoes.
Captain Carolina Scott from Aberdeen. These men are savages. They've robbed and plundered us for centuries. They want putting down, and now this battle's over, I'll make sure they are.
In reality, southwest Scotland had little time for the ousted Stuarts. In the previous Jacobite rebellion of 1715, the Minister of War trained and led a band of 325 parishioners to help defend Dumfries against them. So successful were they that their unused weapons still hang in the museum.
It was the Protestant part of the mantra that really concerned them, the succession now falling to a petty princeling from Hanover who spoke no English.
Was ist das da? Das ist ein Kniff and Fork, Your Majesty. Kniff and Fork. Excellent, Your Majesty. Wunderbar.
Less English even than the Polish-Italian Bonnie Prince Charlie.
With the 45, the latest of the 9 attempted rebellions since 1700, people were resolved to make sure there would be no further such threats to prosperity in the future.
The military road, subsequently built through Galloway in 1764, like the ancient Roman roads before it, allowed not only the swift movement of troops for the pacification of the province, but enabled its economic development too. Before this road, there was virtually no vehicular transport at all in Galloway. Only unsurfaced tracks on which for most of the year neither cart nor coach could travel.
There were no bridges beyond the Nith. What few goods came into the region were mostly brought on pack animals. Local traffic consisted of baskets dragged by horses between two shafts. There was little to export, since agriculture was primitive and barely able to support the existing inhabitants. Blood feuds, wars of religion, and the tradition of reaving made Galloway a lawless place. Even cattle breeding was difficult. Indeed, it is said that in the 17th century, when a fresh supply of meat was needed, the housewife would set a pair of spurs before the menfolk at their meal to indicate that the time had come for a raid on a neighbour's cattle.
Right there, there's nothing safe in die. Train is on table, health and hygienic. Shut your mouth, Charlene. You're not going to make dirty clothes, are you, Ma? These bits were made for walking. Now, Janet, you get up to that supermarket right now, you great big girl, and get me some chicken nuggets and a frozen pizza.
Most people around Palnackie in the 18th century lived in hovels built of stone and turf or mud and often constructed in a single day. There were no chimneys, only holes in the roof, and the rain dyed everything a dingy colour. In winter, their cows were kept at one end of the dwelling house.
John Maxwell of the Munchies.
My tenants in general are cold very quickly, and their habitations are mostly uncomfortable. Many families had no bedstead. They slept in straw or heath, laid on the floor. People changed their shirts only twice a year, at Whitsun and Martinmas, and everyone went barefoot. They lived very meanly on kale and oats, and mutton perhaps at Martinmas.
I scrambled for a mile or two over a rocky broken path along the eastern side of the Ore till I came to Catford, a small village inhabited by shipwrights who build small craft for coasters and fishermen. I was now in a very rude and unfrequented part of the country where a traveller of very ordinary importance was an object of some curiosity.
Get my baby.
Beyond the narrow plain by the Solway, the hills to the north were an uncharted land of shape-changing kelpies, shaggy bog monsters, dragons and witches, the creatures of folklore and dreams, of black-hearted monsters like the MacKillops who slew their guests and dropped them down murder holes in the moor, or cannibals like Sawney Bean, found with a whole larder of body parts.
The military road brought incalculable benefits to southwest Scotland. The contributors to Sir John Sinclair's survey of Scotland in the 1790s are unanimous in their enthusiasm.
In no situation have greater or more rapid improvements been made in roads and bridges, so essential to civilization and the exertion of industry in every sphere. The improvement of land is greatly facilitated and the spirit of improvement prevails. The stranger passes with ease to get and receive information, and articles of trade are transported with facility.
And the new mode of transport by which he did so was the stagecoach, and then by the improvements of two Scots from the southwest, John MacAdam and Thomas Telford. Before MacAdam, roads were made of earth, clay or chalk, which absorbed water. MacAdam used pieces of granite small enough to go through a 2-inch ring, laid to a depth of 10 inches. Later, asphalt was added to the mixture to make tar macadam. One of the finest bridges in the area, at Tongland, was designed by Telford in 1808. It was the first bridge to have weight-saving hollow-ribbed spandrels instead of a solid masonry arch.
No time was wasted in exploiting the new military road. Already, by 1779, there were coaches linking the London-Carlisle route with Dumfries. By 1830, 10 coaches left the King's Arms Inn in Dumfries Dairy. The mail coach established new standards of comfort and efficiency in travel. Maintaining a speed of 8 miles an hour and changing horses every 10 miles, travelling for the first time by night, they accomplished in 24 hours journeys that might have taken a week earlier in the century. Their armed guards, as well as protecting the mail, were also retained by provincial newspapers as the most up-to-date purveyors of news.
What's allowed, you say? Aye.
All this required an efficient mail machine with a network of coaching inns to provide refreshments and the enormous number of fresh horses needed.
The favourite colour of horse was white or grey, because they were easiest to see in the long dark hours.
A change of horse was an exercise in precision. Ostlers unharnessed the leaders, usually lighter, more active horses, and the wheelers, the 2 horses nearest the coach, and led them to their stalls, whilst other ostlers harnessed the fresh team. In 2 or 3 minutes the coach was off again. The age of the stagecoach lasted a mere 60 years in Galloway, and the number of those transported was probably relatively few. But as well as achieving a level of glamour that few modes of transport have equalled, it brought into the region that most precious of commodities, ideas.
George Maxwell of the Munchies, for instance, at about the time the school was being built, was converting 400 acres of bog, much of it under water, into fertile and productive land. He excavated broad open ditches to remove the surface water, and then dug a herringbone pattern of covered drains made of stones filled with heather and brushwood to drain the subsoil. The heather and moss, thus dried out, was burned off, and year after year great quantities of shells were ploughed into the land, turning the blue clay into rich black loam. It took many years to complete, but now transforms the landscape. This so improved the soil that the Palnackie area became a net exporter of cereals by mid-19th century.
Enclosure enabled tree planting to replace the great forest destroyed during the years of religious controversy, providing timber, shelter for animals, and aiding a microclimate for the crops. The growing of turnips and clover as animal feed enriched the land by returning nutrients to the soil. This enabled winter feeding and, together with sown grasses like lucerne, encouraged selective breeding.
Potatoes grew well in marginal land, had a higher yield per acre than traditional oats, and, in the short term, softened the human costs of change. The agriculture was becoming a serious business in Palnackie. By 1844, the parish minister reported,
Zeal for improvements has greatly increased. The system of turnip husbandry is generally adopted.
By 1860, school attendance was determined by the workforce needs of the agricultural year, whatever the schoolmaster may have thought, and bullying, of course, an accepted part of school life. incumbent of the schoolhouse so loved the bottle, it was said he regularly used to order a horse and cart to take him home from the Ship Inn, now the Glen Isle.
A mole, a mast, a mat, a mammoth, a mammoth, a mattis, a mant.
Which ant would that be, sir?
Always conjugate, boy.
I don't think so, sir. Not in your state.
As the improvers transformed the land to make it produce more food and raw materials, for a country increasingly urbanised and mechanised, their long-term effect was to make Britain and Scotland more prosperous. In the short term, however, their efforts produced much human misery. With the land already overworked and under-fertilised, a population increasing in leaps and bounds, doubling between 1750 and 1820, and bad harvests and the resultant starvation a regular feature of rural life, the existing agricultural system desperately needed reform. Enclosure, however, the first step in this process, denied the peasant farmer use of common land for peat cutting and for grazing the handful of cattle by which he obtained his other necessities. Meanwhile, the arrival of steam power created machines that put many craftsmen out of work and brought to an end the cottage industries in which the housewife had been able to contribute to the family income. Worst of all, the new agricultural system required fewer farm workers, and those no longer needed were expelled from their land, without any provision for their needs. Whilst the end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1815 put 500,000 ex-soldiers onto the labour market at a time of severe economic decline.
We are not allowed to erect any shelter at the dig sites to preserve our little ones from the injury of the cold.
Lord declares, we drive us out, feelings where we dwell.
The poor man says, where shall we go?
The wretch says, go to hell.
These words they spoke in jest and mocks, but by their works we know that if they have their herds and flocks, they care not where we go.
Galloway suffered clearances long before those of the Highlands and was the only part of Scotland that saw systematic resistance. In 1723, large gangs of men, the levellers, assembled after dark, each armed with a stave, and at a given signal heaved over the new dry stone walls.
Now then, lads, all together!
It was a broad, popular movement deriving support from nearly every strata of society. Such was its effectiveness that it required troops to put it down, and the final stand was made at Ducray in Palnackie. In reply to the landowners who berated him for allowing his prisoners to escape, Major O'Neill replied,
When I was sent here in command of the troops, my instructions were to suppress rebellious mobs. Instead of which, I find an oppressed, persecuted people committing some irregularities, and I think it below the dignity of His Majesty's field officers to act severely to such people.
One gentleman from Palnackie, caught up in the protest, had a taste of what passed for justice in those days.
This is most serious charge. Most serious. You have very fine road counting outside.
If it would be of service to your lordship, I have no further use for the animal.
Nor the saddle?
No.
Very well then, case dismissed.
Phew. By the 1770s, the new agricultural techniques may have brought increasing yields, but marked for export, whilst many local people were still without food. This led to riots in Dumfries as the starving attempted to stop corn being loaded onto ships.
For many, the only solution was emigration.
The 5th Earl of Selkirk wrote a book urging its benefits and was active in resettlement.
In 1775, the lovely Nellie sailed from Carstone. For many, their last glimpse of Scotland. It was taking a party of immigrants bound for St. John's Island in Canada. The captain of the ship asked them their reasons for going.
John Smith, 33, blacksmith from Colvend. I go because I cannot earn bread here, sufficient to support myself and my family.
John Carson, 20, labourer, Colvend. I go to better myself.
Some were so poor they sold themselves into virtual slavery in the West Indies to gain a passage. Many died of disease or shipwreck on these passages, and conditions were often terrible. But the majority survived, and many became happy and prosperous in their new homes.
There is not a better place under the sun than what is here. I brought 14 acres of land, and if I be spared, I shall have 40 broke next year.
I got a splendid ox and a good cow, and calf, plenty of milk and butter, and plenty to eat of everything.
The country is teeming with animals, birds and fish, and there are no game laws.
It is not until well into the 18th century that organised trade of any significance can be discerned along the Solway. When Daniel Defoe visited Kirkcudbright in 1725, he found that
there is not a vessel that deserves the name of ship belongs to it. In a word, they have a gold mine on their doorstep and will not use it.
Even Dumfries did not have a harbour until 1747, nor Southerness its lighthouse until the following year. By 1791, there are landing facilities of some sort at Burlochan or Garden Creek. Granite did not take off until the 1820s, leading to the construction of a large harbour at the junction of Dalbeattie Burn and the Ur, with a turning berth.
By 1812 there is shipbuilding at Kipford. Thereafter, the newspapers of the time report a rapid expansion of shipbuilding all along the northern coast of the Solway.
1818. On Thursday last, a fine new brig of about 300 tons was launched at Glencapel by the name of Thompson's Packet, amidst loud and repeated cheers. After which, a great number of ladies and gentlemen sat down to an elegant dinner. Mirth and good humour prevailed, and the company separated at a late hour, highly delighted with the entertainment of the day.
by the mid-19th century, Palnackie was a flourishing port, exporting grain, oatmeal, potatoes and fat cattle and sheep, and importing timber, coal, lime, bone meal, slates and manufactured goods. All this was achieved in spite of considerable natural obstacles. By 1850 at Palnackie, the creek had been quayed on both sides, forming a basin 40 feet across. But silting up remained a problem. Added to this were the twists and turns of the river. From Orchard Knowes, vessels had to be pulled by horse. Larger schooners would be loaded and unloaded manually by dock labourers at Palnackie port, and their contents transported to and from Dalbeattie by horse and cart.
By the 1840s, Palnackie was a thriving, bustling port. There was a full range of trades, including a miller, a millwright, joiners, a tailor, shoemakers, and a carter, a mason, and a blacksmith. There were grocers, publicans, and butchers, a schoolmaster and a gospel preacher, and no less than 4 dressmakers. There were ship owners, a customs collector, dealers, coopers, and merchants, a shipbuilding yard at Garden Burn, and perhaps as many as 30 sailors coming and going, their lodgings accounting for the unusually high number of 2-storey buildings for such a small village.
James Watt's refinement of the steam engine was perhaps the single most important innovation of the Industrial Revolution. In 1788, Patrick Miller pioneered a miniature steamship on Dulswinton Lock. By the 1820s, steam packets were providing a regular service across the Irish Sea, linking the Solway ports with Liverpool. They had a major impact on farming. Steam was safer and more reliable than sail, and journeys easier to plan. Cattle, instead of losing condition in the long drive down to Norfolk, could now be fattened on the farm and then shipped directly to market.
For a time, ships seemed unstoppable in Galloway, and plans were drawn up to construct a canal from Palnackie to Castle Douglas.
Tell us more, Mr. Paddingham.
Thank you, Sir Alistair. The canals will have 4 locks. One down at Diddy Hill.
Yes, 2 on the door. Yes, that is exciting.
And 1 past the toll on the road to Castle Douglas.
Excellent, excellent. Is this all really necessary, gentlemen? But Mr. Snarl, at present, everything has to be unloaded at Palnackie, and then horses and carts have to take it out of Castle Douglas.
And I think, Sir Alistair, Snar's Holiday and livery stables have always given a good service.
So they have, Mr. Snarl, so they have. But this will enable ships to go all the way with their loads. Think of that, sailing ships in the lock.
Gentlemen, some vessels may even go via Collingwood Lane here, on to the River Dee, and so upwards to New Galloway.
Captain, taking lime and coal as well as marl. Bailey Giffen, you're as white as a sheet man. Whatever's the matter?
gentlemen. I'm not wasting my time here. Canals, emptied, out of date. Now I've got to buy some chairs. Not you, Paddington Chair.
The early steam engines, pioneered by the Cornishman Richard Trevithick in 1804, were only suitable for colliery work, moving little faster than a horse. It was not until Robert Stephenson's rocket in 1829 that a design emerged that would make it a viable form of transport. During the 1830s, railways began to spread through Britain and by 1850 linked all the major towns. Dumfries was joined by Gretna to the West Coast Line in 1848 and directly to Glasgow in 1850.
Determined not to be left out of the system, Galloway quickly pushed ahead with its own railway by public subscription, the line from Dumfries to Dalbeattie in Castle Douglas being opened in 1859. That to Patrick followed in 1861.
The speed with which this was achieved is a tribute to the skill of the engineers and to the hard work of the thousands of mainly Irish navvies employed. More so because practically all of it was built with picks and shovels, labour being cheaper after the Great Famine than machinery.
Edingham Moss posed a major obstacle. After thousands of tons of large granite rocks had disappeared into the bog without a trace, the engineer, James Galloway, copying a technique pioneered by George Stephenson, wove mattresses of tree branches, mainly willow, which successfully supported the track. Landowner opposition on the coastal strip forced the railway into the hills. Viaducts had to be built across the little and big waters of Fleet and across Lough Ken.
The work of the navvies was hard and dangerous. Excavating, tunnelling, blasting rocks to make cuttings, building viaducts. The word navvy has entered our language as a byword for hard work and for swearing. They lived in temporary encampments and drank their meagre pay.
Many died as boys, run over by the wagons of spoil. Those that survived generally died in early manhood, victims of the march of progress, but in a strange way infected with it too. Alexander Anderson from Kirkconnell, a navvy, wrote,
Hurrah for the mighty engine as he bounds along his track. Hurrah for the life that's in him and his breast so thick and black. And hurrah for our fellows who in their meat could fashion a thing like him, with a heart of fire, a soul of steel, and a Samson in every limb.
Although the coming of the railway put paid both to the steamship and the stagecoach, the increasing volume of goods actually stimulated the need for local horse-drawn transport. A horse-drawn cab service, for instance, ran twice daily from Auchencairn through Palnackie to Dalbeattie to meet the trains, whilst the new railway stations instantly became lime and coal depots requiring many horse-drawn vehicles for their local distribution. A railway through the region created many new opportunities, like tourism. Galloway's beauties were discovered for the first time by the leisure classes.
Mommy, can I see the pianos when we get there?
Maybe. I want to go to the beach.
I'm Pacific.
The coastline was developed at places like Rockcliffe.
And by the end of the century, a modern coach tour was born.
Dumfries and Galloway Standard, May the 25th, 1895.
A new era opened yesterday when Mr. William Douglas started his new Royal Mail coach, Flower of Eskdale.
Drive is such a splendid one. I have decided to open up the district as a regular tourist coach route.
The coach is of a charavan order and holds 16 persons comfortably.
It has yellow wheels and plush cushions, with the addition of a horn to arouse the inhabitants of the route, as well as warn the road obstructionists of the approach of Her Majesty's coach.
The scenery throughout is very beautiful, comprising hill, wood, river and dale.
And there are numerous objects of interest on the way, including Craigluch, the mansion of General Sir John Hewitt.
Charavan onto my land.
Hornfoot, where Colonel Malcolm lives.
Clear off, or I'll set the dogs on you.
Wester Hall, the seat of Sir F. J. W. Johnston Bart.
Frederick seems quite large enough. Look at these stairs up. Fallen little people.
How dare you? What did we do to you?
Castle Oar belonging to Mr. Bell. And Langham Lodge, one of the residences of the Duke of Buccleuch.
Ice cream skirts, anyone can fly.
Local shipping, some of it still sail, was less easy to kill off than the steam packet. As late as 1879, Palnackie Harbour was repaired and a harbour master appointed. The Our Navigation Trust was formed in 1901 and a steam tug, the Thusla, purchased to pull ships up to Dohity. Going to sea, however, remained a perilous business. Many of the worst wrecks could happen close to the shore. The swell from the Atlantic and extremely strong currents often brought tragedy to local towns and villages. Furthermore, as the west coast continued to silt up, the treacherous sandbanks at the mouth of the Ar were ever-changing. So many vessels perished in the Burnhoorie sands that Blockady Bay was laid open and declared a free port of refuge by an Act of Parliament.
In 1891, on the 31st of January, there was a terrible storm with mountainous waves and strong winds. The staves of flounder nets were snapped, and it was dark continuously, even at midday for 48 hours. The New Importer, a schooner owned by Carswells of Dalbeattie, went down. There were no survivors. A boy of 17 and fathers of families from Palnackie all died, as a local journalist wrote.
Men who had been miraculously saved on parole betwixt here and the Arctic regions perished on the mouth of the Ar.
In 1867, returning home from Maryport with its owner Samuel Wilson, the schooner, the Elf, was anchored in Blockady Bay, waiting for the rising tide, when suddenly a gale blew up, snapping first the cable chains and then the rudder. She was swept between Heston Island and the mainland, across the mouth of the Ar and towards the rocks below Scotland. 3 times the surge threw her towards the cliff, and each time 2 of the 6-man crew climbed the bowsprit and jumped to safety on the rocks. Just as the captain and the mate were clear, the wind swung to the northwest, driving the ship out to sea and onto a regular course, just as if she were still manned, and they saw her finally go down off the Scarrow.
Few sailors in similar straits could expect to be so fortunate, and in 1884 there was much celebration when a lifeboat station was built near the tower in Valkyrie Bay.
Manning it, however, proved difficult, and eventually it was handed over as an alternative boat for the Kirkcudbright station. In 1893, a light was put in Heston, mainly by public subscription.
In 1916, a traveller found in the only dwelling house on the island an aged lighthouse keeper who was about to retire from his office.
He tells me that he paid 24 pence rent for the island and receives a wage of 25 pence as lighthouse keeper. He lives by sheep farming.
Imports went to the grain and fertiliser merchants in Dalbeattie, even as late as the 1970s, together with some coal, whilst exports included a considerable quantity of timber from Palnackie for the mines of Cumberland and Lancashire, together with the occasional cargo of oats. But it was the quarries, mainly at Craignare, providing a steady supply of granite, which kept the trade balance and accounted for Palnackie's continued success. Craignare Quarry had been established back in the 1820s by the Liverpool Dock Trustees. It went on to provide granite for harbours, piers and other constructions throughout Britain. The earliest buildings, using local granite, like Cally Palace and Tongland Bridge, involved importing specialist craftsmen, but by the 1830s, local masons had learnt the craft. And several hundred were employed at Craignare. From 1860, a great impetus to the local granite industry was provided by the railway, itself a major customer, using thousands of tons for track work. Such was the demand that 6 crushing plants were established in Dalbeattie and an overhead ropeway constructed to take 26 buckets, each able to take 6 tons of granite, all the way from the quarry to the railway station.
Although by the 1930s it was estimated that there were still 30 schooners regularly on the 4 northern rivers, Palnackie's success was clearly slipping away. More and more ships are recorded as bringing full cargoes but going away light or in ballast. It was the end of an era many still regret.
When winds were unfavourably disposed to outward-bound vessels, it was the custom for these to lie at anchor in front of the Scaur. Then, when the breeze shifted into the right quarter, weather stained sails would flutter out on the tall masts of perhaps a dozen vessels, and as the foam gathered on their bows and they bent to the breeze, it was a sight of beauty and grace that few would ever forget.
Around the 1870s, British farming received a series of severe blows from which it has never really recovered. It had dominated local life for centuries, and now suddenly, for the first time, it was challenged. The almost complete lack of farmhouses built since that time reflects that loss of confidence. Imports of cereals from the great North American prairies, often paradoxically spearheaded by the descendants of Scottish immigrants a century earlier, put an end to cereal production on the land so laboriously reclaimed in the 18th century, which now reverted to grazing. Traditional stock rearing survived, shaken by foreign imports, but the railway now provided a lifeline in allowing diversification into dairy farming. Dairy products could now be transported speedily to the city centres, and factories making cheese and butter were established close to the stations.
So much did the railway dominate Western Europe that the First World War, it is said, could not be stopped once it had started, because it was being run on railway timetables.
Can I help you, sir? Well, sir, I've still got some tickets for the attack on Jericho Ridge at 2:45. Or would you prefer to wait for the Battle of the Somme at 4 o'clock? I've had some late cancellations for that. I could give you seats facing the wall. How many? Will that be single or return?
Goodbye, Daphne.
Goodbye, Arthur.
It's been a talking leave,
But so short.
war is hell,
And I do miss you so.
and I miss you too. Look, old thing, I think you're a frightful sport,
Oh, Arthur.
and we do rub along swimmingly.
Yes, we do.
Do you think, after the war, we could, well, make a go of it?
Oh, Arthur.
Mind the doors.
Do you?
What?
Do you? Do you?
Little do you remember when we did left me? How you told me that you loved me, laying at my feet. Oh, how fragrant stood before me in your suit so new. When you found to me a country, certain to be true. Weeping, sad and lonely, hopes and fears have vain. When this cruel war is over, praying that we'll meet again.
Well before the Great War, however, a new form of transport was becoming increasingly popular amongst the well-to-do, the motor car. The earliest horseless carriages, as they were called, were driven by steam, with a man walking in front with a red flag.
That's funny. Must have gone too fast.
But the steam car proved slow, dangerous and cumbersome, and eventually only the traction engine remained using this mode of propulsion. Instead, in the 1880s, the Germans, Daimler and Benz, developed the internal combustion engine, and the first cars in Britain were imported ones. A vehicle without horses that could go under its own power was immensely exciting and he soon drew its devotees.
The internal combustion engine, however, worked by a series of small explosions in the cylinder, and its noise and speed frightened many used only to the slower horse transport. There was considerable resistance to it, and speed limits imposed of 4 and even 2 miles an hour. It was not until 1896 that the speed limit was increased to 12 miles an hour. This was celebrated as Emancipation Day by enthusiasts throughout the land.
By 1903, speed limits in Galway had increased to 20 miles an hour on the open road and 10 miles in towns. But attitudes had not much changed.
Call James McIntyre, call James McIntyre. Are you James McIntyre? I am. You see, before you in the dock, Your Honour, one of the most heinous criminals ever was hauled before you. And what's the nature of the stuff to call him? Driving with excessive speed, Your Honour. Oh, the witness upon you, but the nerves spare the horse, eh? No, Your Honour. The defendant was travelling in what I believe is called a motor car. A motor car? You mean without horse, eh? I am afraid so, Your Honour. How unnatural and degrading. And as such, Your Honour, within the tongue boundaries was subject to a 10 mile an hour restriction. Oh, far too high in my opinion. And what is the black car doing? 17 miles an hour. 17 miles an hour? 17 miles an hour. It's disgraceful. To go any faster, you have to carry pistols to protect yourself. Now, you rascal, how do you plead? Guilty, Your Honour. Young man, it's an extremely grave charge. Yes, Your Honour. Fine for son for 7 days in jail. Thank you, Your Honour. It was up to me, lad. It was boiling oil. Yes, Your Honour. Pour down your throat. Now surely it's time to start. There's a sad one, much in greeting and baked currant jelly. There's more yet, my lord. Another case of speeding? Well, 17 actually. Then it's on with it. Ah, Mr. Lyons, how good of you to get us court as a spectator, I trust. You must join me at dinner. What? You're here as a witness? Oh dear. Call John James Hannah. Your Honour, are you a chauffeur of Jesfield Michael? I am. And do you please guilty at Closebound driving with excessive speed, knowing the speed limit on the open road to be 20 miles an hour? 20 miles an hour? As much as that? And driving at 25 miles an hour? I do it, Your Honour. 25 miles an hour? Is there no limit to wanting witness? If I could just say, of course, Mr. Straight-Line, we'd be grateful for you to address our court. Well, I have to admit, I was in the car at the time, and being delayed on 2 occasions on the journey, I told the person to shove on a bit. You told them to shove on a bit? You heard the lady, Culpepper. I know, it was awfully silly of me, thinking, but it was the bridge car, and I was going to be most awfully late. Indeed, the court quite understands your difficulty. You see, if one goes over 20 miles an hour, it isn't long before one goes over 25, and on the open road, with the wind in one's delightful, delightful. But with our special police being so frightfully vigilant, one is almost pinned before one knows where one is.
You see, you reckon, when the lady says shove on a bit, she means 20 miles an hour, not 25.
Oh, Pinky, you really are a sweetie.
I'm fine.
The earliest motor car to have been produced locally was the Drummond between 1905 and 1909, but production started in earnest when the oldest Scottish car manufacturer, Arnold Johnston from Paisley, built a new factory at Heath Hall in 1912. During the First World War, a second factory was opened at Tongland. After the war, there was an increasing demand for cars. But money was tight, and there was less to spend on quality vehicles like the Arnold Johnston. Time and again, the local papers reveal stiff competition from cheaper imported, mass-produced cars, especially after the economic slump of 1921. Arnold Johnston fought back and launched a new, cheaper car, the Galloway, at their Tongland factory.
At about the same time, Jai B. Skeoch of Dobiti built a few cars at Burnside Motorworks. The Skeoch utility cycle car was about 9 feet long, powered by a 3-horsepower motorcycle engine, and intended to fill the gap between the motorcycle and the saloon car, retailing at around £165. It began manufacture at the end of 1920 with high hopes, but the works burned down a year later.
Owning a motor car at the beginning of the 19th century was, of course, only for the nobs, and even travel by rail was not something that most ordinary people much experienced as a daily event. So how did they travel? Mostly they walked, unless they had a cart, and few journeyed very far. When the train banished the stagecoach, the metalled road stimulated one early form of transport that is still with us, the bicycle. Strange to realise that it hadn't even been thought of when the school was built. The bicycle grew out of the late 18th century German hobby horse, pushed along with the legs, until another local inventor, Kirkpatrick Macmillan of Keir, near Pen Pond, added pedals in 1839. But the greatest development was the invention of the pneumatic tyre by John Boyd Dunlop of Ayr in 1888. This not only paved the way for the motor car, but after it made the aeroplane and much else possible too.
By the end of the century, the bicycle was the preferred mode of transport of the common man. The bicycle, the wonderful machine that it is, has severe limitations for carrying luggage, for instance, or in bad weather, or for those more advanced in years. And it was the development of the bus which really changed ordinary people's lives. The omnibus, which in Latin means for all, started as a horse-drawn vehicle. But it was in its motorised form from the 1920s that it truly became popular.
Good folks live in the town of Kirkfield. Good news I hae heard, fine things I hae seen.
Oh, hello, Mrs. Thorpe Patterson.
Oh, do straighten yourself up. I hae got a bus for your legs to ease. You may hae a ride whenever you please.
Just like his father. Any news of him?
No, she does like to get some. Each day in the morn to town you may go, both warm or dry, though it rain, hail or snow. Sandy'll pick you up in his machine and bring you back safe at the night from Kirkfield. There's half a croon, it is but a name. To walk a mile you would be for to blame. Come on, wait a minute, please.
Come on!
10 miles to the station, short of 13. I'm sure such cheap riding never was to be seen.
Oh, driver, go without him.
Come on, I'll go with you. No. Hey, it's gone. Sandy, get back here, old terrier! Sandy!
Ordinary people were indeed able to go whenever they pleased on the bus, and its ready availability, even in many rural localities, changed forever patterns of employment, housing, shopping and leisure. Unrestricted by the fixed pattern of railway lines, buses were often able to be quicker and always cheaper than the train. However, what finally put paid to the form of transport that had become to dominate the southwest, which had seen off the steamer and the stagecoach, and which had even learned to live with the motor car, was not the bus, but its cousin, the lorry. Between 1949 and 1958, whilst passenger traffic through Dalbeattie dropped by a third, goods traffic collapsed completely, falling by over 4/5. Biggar's Mill, for instance, which at one time had required 3 trains a week simply for its own goods, now found it more economic to load up the lorries at the mill and send them by that means to their destinations. The scene was thus set for the savage blow which came in 1965.
Dumfries Town.
Oh, inconvenient. What are we getting up here? Oh, bother.
Oh, Mr. Porter, oh, what a tease. I want to get Palnackie bus and take it there for free. I know you go to London every day you can. Now get me to my station or you're a very naughty man.
I would have said that's no trouble, lady. You just change at Maxwell Town, Lockhead, Killywanny, Southwick, and then it's straight on.
So change it to Maxwell Town, Killywan, Lockhead, Southwick, and then it's straight on.
That was the case, ma'am, but the times, they are a-changing.
Now, 1965.
Oh, I'm just a humble porter, adrift in a world full of lies. I think you'll agree things are not what you'll see. Trains no longer run from Dumfries. Oh, I'm just the grave, wearing my faith in a crown.
What's all this then? I was telling the ladies how to get to Palnackie. Well, so did you really, Mr. Beecham, sir?
Trains to Palnackie? Will be no more trains to Palnackie, my lad.
Pray why not, Mr. Beecham, sir?
He leaves on the line.
In many ways, the modern truck has taken over from the sailing ship with which this story began. It may not have quite the same romantic associations, though it may generally be safer. And there remain serious questions about whether the roads really are the place for heavy goods, when the region used to have perfectly good railway tracks to take them.
Which the sun's rays can get through going towards there, but they hit off there, bounce back, and they can't get out. And all the time, more sun's rays are still getting in. So they're like creating a kind of greenhouse.
In the North Pole, all the ice is melting, so all the ice getting hot, and the polar bears now soon become extinct, and all the water levels are rising. Tornadoes, earthquake, droughts.
And are they really always carrying the things we need? Galloway is a producer of food. Why then is so much of what we eat brought by road from elsewhere? But as in the era of shipping, road haulage now serves to get many of the things we make and the things we need to the destination as quickly and as economically as possible.
How then has Palnackie changed as a result of all that has happened in its forms of transport over the years since the school was first built?
Farming remains the most numerous employment, but only just, and now constituting, with forestry and estate management, only a fifth of the total. The welfare service industries, principally education and health, together with local government, have replaced merchant shipping as its chief rival. But trades like building provide a remarkable degree of continuity. Half the people who answered our questionnaire still work in the village, showing that perhaps on a daily basis the development of transport has had less impact than might have been expected. More typical of the change brought by transport, however, is evidence of a much greater movement of people in and out of the area than in 1841. Only 13 adults give Palnackie as their place of birth. About a fifth come from outside Scotland. About a quarter of the population are retired. About half of them, mostly born locally, staying at Burlochan.
And how has transport changed our lives? We eat very differently from the 18th century peasant with his oat diet, or people in 1913.
Shortcake, 100 here.
What else can't you find?
Tomato sauce.
What else?
Chips.
We have a lot more choice of food, but are we better for it? Oats remain one of the best things you can eat, whilst much modern food is full of salt, fats, and especially sugar.
anybody who doesn't like going to McDonald's?
I don't. I do not.
Right, why not?
I prefer Kentucky Fried Chicken. There's two supermarkets. Well, Safeway and Norville's, they're right together, next to each other, and are probably fighting to see who gets more customers. Once the other one's not there, they can higher their prices because the customers have got no choice to go to another one. The supermarkets shut down and the farmers don't get as much money as they did when they were both open.
Through all of the changes over 2 centuries, Palnackie in many ways has stayed the same. Although some of the properties on the edge of the village are second homes, most are still lived in throughout the year, and their inhabitants contribute to a sense of community. We still have a shop and a pub and a school. Many other villages do not.
Time and again, though, our inquiries brought us back to the great technological changes that machines have brought to our daily life and employment. Renovating the Glen Isle a little while ago and stripping back the old wallpaper, the new owners came upon a snug everyone had long forgotten. And in the corner, Reuben and Winkle, there since 1803, and still on his second pint of Theakston's old peculiar.
No need, Reuben. There's a mobile machine that does that. A machine, you say?
Aye. Everything works by machinery now. First there was the Jethro Tull seed drill, then the reaper that cuts the crops and weeds. Then there was the binder and the threshing machine.
Oh, it must be heaven to be a farm labourer with all them gadgets.
And now we have the tractor and the milking machine.
Milking machine? But what do the milkmaids do all day long?
There are no milkmaids anymore, Reuben, they've all gone.
What kind of that?
I'm sorry, Reuben, we're going to have to let you go.
But who'll look after the horses?
There are no horses anymore. It's all done by machinery.
And all the old farm hands? Then they've all gone?
All gone.
Now it's you and your tiny little wife when they're here.
Me? It's heavy. I'm looking